Oh, so your favorite trope is enemies to lovers. Why is it so hard for you to imagine someone just genuinely being nice to you? Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am taking you through some of my favorite books that have the enemies to lovers trope. This isn't exactly one of my favorite tropes, but there are a couple of my favorite books on this list that do have the trope here somewhere. That is probably something that I need to address in therapy, but for now, the books are keeping me going. Let's start off with one of the books that I have mentioned quite a few times, and that is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I credit this book as the one that kind of got me into steamy adult contemporary romance. I first read it during the pandemic when going on holiday and traveling was just a mere pipe dream for so many people. And this book takes place on Maui, one of the Hawaiian islands, and follows Olive and Ethan, who have to go on their siblings' honeymoon. Hear me out. Olive's twin sister Amy has married Ethan's brother Dane, but everybody at the wedding, except for Olive and Ethan, has gotten food poisoning. Because Amy and Dane won their honeymoon, it is non-refundable, it cannot be cancelled, somebody has to go on it. So, because they are identical twin sisters, Olive goes in Amy's place, and because it was only booked under Dane's last name, Ethan goes in his place. You've got a whole lot of tropes in here. You have got your enemies to lovers, you've also got there was only one bed, you have got kind of I didn't know that you looked at me in that kind of way before. It's got a whole lot of stuff in here. It's also got a little bit of kind of slapstick humor. It's got a little bit of a kind of a subterfuge to do with Olive's new job. I really enjoyed this book, and I really like seeing the relationship between Olive and Ethan thaw as the book goes on. I will say I don't always jive with the ending of this book. There are a couple of things that I wish were done a little differently, but overall, this is one of my favorite summer reads. Next up is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This is by far my favorite of Sally Thorne's books. I've read second First Impressions and I didn't love it as much as this one. And I have heard a couple of iffy things about 99% Mine, so I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to go into it or not. The Hating Game follows Josh and Lucy, who are both working in a publishing house as kind of assistants or PAs to rival CEOs who are both kind of in the same company together. It transpires that there is a brand new position going to be opening up very soon, and Josh and Lucy are both up for the promotion. They make a pact that whoever gets the promotion, the other one is going to quit because they hate each other so much that they cannot fathom working for the other person. They cannot fathom having to actually be responsible to them or held accountable by them. And then there's a whole heap of hijinks that happen between the two of them, cut by a whole lot of sexual tension, a taking care of the other when you're sick scene, a really steamy elevator scene. If you haven't read the book, you may have already heard of the film that stars Lucy Hale and some very tall guy called Austin, I think. It's a really good film, and if you enjoyed the film, I would definitely go and check out the book too. Next up is one that I literally just finished, maybe about an hour ago, called Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. This is the second book of the Bright Fall series, but I would kind of say that you can read them out of sync, out of order, without having read Delilah Green Doesn't Care. Though I think you should read Delilah Green Doesn't Care. As you can tell by the title, this follows Astrid Parker, whose life now is completely different to how she had imagined it going a year ago. Her relationship has broken down, her engagement has broken down. She is starting a new job as a kind of an interior designer for a hotel or a B&B in the town that she's living in. This renovation is going to be televised on a show called Inside America. And while she's working on this, there is another designer on the show called Jordan that has caught Astrid's eye, but they clash instantly as soon as they meet each other because Jordan accidentally spills coffee over Astrid's dress. What follows then is a whole lot of butting heads about design ideas, a whole lot of sexual tension, and some decisions that don't always work out for the best of the in. Next up is Tweet Cute by Emma Lord, and this is Emma's YA debut, and it is so cozy. It has got really great cozy autumnal vibes. So if you're looking for a book that you can just curl up in the corner with a cup of coffee or some hot cocoa and a snack, definitely check this one out. It follows Pepper and Jack, whose families work for rival diners in New York City. Pepper has actually just moved up to New York with her family, and Jack is kind of an established face in the New York foodie scene. Pepper's family have opened up their diner and are putting a grilled cheese sandwich on the menu. The problem is that it is eerily similar to the grilled cheese that is on the menu in Jack's family's diner. So obviously they are kind of sparring and butting heads over this, but what they don't know, Jack has created an app just for their school where everyone can log in anonymously and they get usernames that are like animals or birds or fish. Jack and Pepper have been messaging on this for about a year and don't know that it's the other one. Up next is Beat Dreed by Emily Henry. This is Emily Henry's adult debut. I know that she has got a couple of YA books to her bow, but I've never read any of those. This follows January and Gus, who are authors who met each other in college, either in classes or at seminars, and haven't really gotten on. January writes a lot of kind of happy, light-hearted contemporary fiction, whereas Gus's books are very dark, very moody, very kind of thriller vibes. Both of them are going through a little bit of writer's block at the moment. Everything is kind of falling apart in January's life. Her father has just passed away and she has just realised that he has been living a second life for ages that she had no idea about. And Gus is also going through some writer's block, so he comes down to a beach house in Michigan to kind of kickstart the creative vibes again and try and get his book done before deadline. January has the same idea, but it turns out that their two beach houses are right next door to each other. To kind of help out with the writer's block, they decide to swap genres. January is going to write the next big thriller on the market, and Gus is going to write a really happy, really light-hearted book for the first time. So they take each other on trips to go and research everything and start to get a little bit closer in the process. Next recommendation is At Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the third book of the Brown Sister trilogy, but you can, again, read these out of sync, out of order. You can start with Eve Brown if this one really sounds like your kind of book. As you can tell, we are following Eve Brown, who is the youngest of the Brown sisters, and her parents sit her down one day and tell her that they are going to be cutting off all of the money that they give her, unless she goes out and get a job in the next 6 months. Not one to back down from a challenge, Eve goes to a local B&B that she knows is hiring a cook or a chef, puts her name forward, and has probably the worst job interview that she's ever been to. One of the guys interviewing her is so moody, is so kind of held back and reserved. She has no idea how to read this guy, but she's pretty sure that this is not going to be the job for her. She leaves the B&B, gets into her car, and accidentally runs Jacob over and breaks his arm. Now, you may think that this is the final nail in the coffin. Eve is not going to be getting the job, but Jacob really, really needs the help now. So, a little bit reluctantly, he hires Eve as kind of chef, maid, receptionist, and just gives her a chance. As you can imagine, the kind of storminess between Eve and Jacob really starts to thaw out and turn into a little bit of steaminess on the way. Next up, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This is probably, to date, the only Tessa Bailey book that I would go back and reread. I really enjoyed this one, and it completely took me by surprise how much I enjoyed it. The book follows Piper, who is an heiress living in LA, and she's kind of gone a little bit too far this time. She has broken into a hotel and broken into one of the suites and had a massive party that was ended with the cops being called at 3 a.m. and Piper waking up in a jail cell. Her dad has had enough, so he sends her off to Westport, which is a tiny little fishing village on the west coast of the US. Here she's tasked with running the family pub, and while she's here she bumps into Brendan, who is a fisherman living in the local community and is probably the grumpiest person that she's ever met. They instantly dislike each other, but over time, Piper starts to chisel away at this kind of grumpy and hard exterior that Brendan has got, and we get to see a really, really sweet romance developing between the two of them. Next up is probably the OG of Enemies to Lovers, and that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. It might surprise you to think that Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy are on this list, but if you think about it, the first time that Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy meet, they genuinely cannot stand each other. And this does continue throughout the whole of the book until Elizabeth realises one day that she genuinely cannot live her life without this man. I have only read this book once. I think I might go back and read it again in another stage, but it did instantly spit out to me that this is probably one of the first enemies to lovers books that was ever put on sale. Next up is The Right Swipe by Alicia Rai. This is the first book of the modern dating series, and it follows Rhiannon and Samson. Rhiannon has developed a dating app which is kind of like Bumble in that women are the ones to make the first move, they're the ones to send the first message to the people that they've matched with. And Samson is a former NFL player who is now working with his family and his aunt to develop a somewhat similar dating app. And the two of them, of course, clash heads. It turns out that Rhiannon and Samson have actually already met each other. They had a one-night stand a couple of months ago where Rhiannon was kind of into it and she would have loved to hear from him again, but Samson ghosted her. So when they meet again at a kind of an app development conference, things don't particularly go so well. But it turns out there was a huge miscommunication. Samson really genuinely wanted to see her again, and you can kind of see Rhiannon getting a little bit more on board with that. Next up is The X-Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. This is Rachel Lynn Solomon's adult debut, and it follows Shay and Dominic, who are both working for a public radio station in the northwest of the US. Shay has been with the radio station for about 10 years. She is a producer for one of the really big afternoon shows. And Dominic has come in as a kind of an intern news reporter, and he's turning the company on its head a little bit. He is getting a lot more opportunities than Shay would have gotten. He's breaking a lot more stories. He's breaking a lot more new ground. And the people behind the station are starting to notice this coldness between the two of them, but it's given them an idea to kind of revive the station's identity, to boost their ratings, to get a couple of more people talking about the show. They're going to start a dating show to give people advice from the point of view of two exes. The problem is that Shay and Dominic aren't exes. They've never dated each other, they've never slept together, they've never even kissed each other. Yet. Of course, as Shay and Dominic are starting to spend more time together, as they're starting to get to know each other a little better, it might be a little bit of a danger that the show isn't showing what it's supposed to be. Next up is The Henna Wars by Adiba Jagadar. This is Adiba's debut novel. It is set in Dublin and it follows two girls who are about 16, 17 years old called Nishat and Flavia. Nishat is Muslim and has just come out to her family as a lesbian, but they are not accepting of this at all. When the school that the two girls go to opens up a kind of a mini business competition between the girls in their year, Nishat decides that she's going to pay some homage to her culture and to her Bangladeshi upbringing by offering henna tattoos. She's going to offer them out to all of the girls that are in her school for events or just because they really like the idea of it. Except that Flavia has been to a wedding that Nishat was at recently, saw them doing henna tattoos, and decided that she wants to get on board that train too. There's really great discussions in this book about cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation, about Islamophobia, biphobia, lesbophobia, homophobia as a whole, and also all of the stress and the pressure that we can put teenagers on to figure out who they are, to perform to the best of their abilities, even if we think that this best of their ability is more than what they can deliver. Finally, we have got Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I know that Emily Henry has already appeared in this video, so it feels like Enemies to Lovers is just something that she does really well. This one follows Nora and Charlie, who, as with Gus and January, are both working in the book industry, but this time as publishers rather than authors. Nora and Charlie have worked on a book previously and completely butted heads every single time that they have to speak to each other. Nora and her sister Libby are in a small town in North Carolina where one of their favorite TV shows is being filmed or is set, and they're just going here for the month to kind of reconnect with each other, but also to drink in the atmosphere of this little town that they're in, all of the stuff that has to do with the show, all of the places that their favorite characters would have walked down or sat for coffee. And while she's here, she bumps into Charlie, who it turns out is one of the locals in this town. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's my favorite of the Emily Henry books, but I'm gonna have to read all three of them again just to figure it out. Those are some of my favorite books with the enemies to lovers trope. What book is your favorite that has the enemies to lovers trope, or what is your favorite of the other tropes? If you can't think of anything that you'd like to say but you would still like to leave a comment, then just leave the broken heart emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.